The gunshot ricocheted through the valley, sending a flock of ravens scattering into the Montana sky as Vance Jameson tracked his prey through the golden prairie grass. It wasn't a deer or outlaw he pursued now, but memories the kind that haunted a man through endless nights, leaving him hollow by morning light. The year was 1876, and at 32, Vance had already lived several lifetimes of grief. The small town of Whispering Pines had become his reluctant home 3 years prior, after the Apache raid that claimed both his wife and infant son while he'd been away hunting. Their small homestead burned to ash, and with it, whatever softness remained in his heart. Now he served as the town's sheriff, a position nobody else wanted in this lawless stretch of territory, earning him a reputation as a man who enforced justice with cold precision and spoke only when necessary. Vance nudged his chestnut mare forward, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the land as he completed his daily patrol. The town had been relatively peaceful lately, which suited him fine. Less trouble meant fewer decisions, fewer entanglements with people who might one day disappear just like Sarah and little Thomas had. As the town came into view, Vance noticed unusual activity around the stagecoach stop. A crowd had gathered something rare for a Wednesday afternoon. Whispering Pines wasn't exactly a popular destination. It was merely a waypoint between larger settlements, a place where most travelers stopped only long enough to water their horses before moving on. "Sheriff," called Elmer, the elderly station master, waving his arms frantically. "Thank heavens you're back," Vance dismounted, his spurs jangling against the packed dirt. "What's happened?" "Stagecoach from Helena got robbed about 10 miles north. Driver made it here, but he's pretty shot up. Doc Palmer's with him now." A robbery so close to town meant trouble. Bandits rarely struck once and disappeared. They tended to grow bolder with each success. "Any passengers?" Vance asked, already mentally preparing for a tracking expedition. "Just one, a woman." Elmer jerked his thumb toward the saloon. "She's inside with Mabel, seems shaken but unharmed." Vance nodded, adjusting his weathered Stetson before leading his horse to the water trough. "I'll need descriptions, last known direction." "Sure thing, Sheriff, but you might want to check on the lady first. Been through quite an ordeal, she has." With a noncommittal grunt, Vance secured his horse and strode toward the saloon. People moved out of his path instinctively, not out of fear exactly, but a certain respectful wariness that came from knowing a man carried grief like loaded pistols. The Silver Dollar Saloon was unusually quiet for this time of day. A few regulars nursed their whiskeys at scattered tables, and Mabel, the owner's wife, stood behind the bar wiping glasses. Next to her sat a woman Vance had never seen before, her back straight despite obvious exhaustion. Even from the doorway, something about her presence commanded attention. Her russet hair was pinned up but coming loose, with wayward strands framing a face that showed both strength and vulnerability. She wore a simple traveling dress of deep blue, now dusty from the journey. Vance approached slowly, hat in hand, a courtesy he extended without thinking. "Madam, I'm Sheriff Jameson." When she turned, her eyes met his eyes, the color of summer sage, and something shifted in the air between them. For a heartbeat, Vance forgot why he'd come over, then she smiled. It wasn't a broad, untroubled smile, how could it be, after what she'd endured, but rather a gesture of gentle resilience that crinkled the corners of her eyes and illuminated her features with unexpected warmth. "Zara Whitfield," she said, extending her hand. "I understand you're the law in these parts." Her voice carried a slight Eastern accent, refined but not pretentious. When Vance took her hand, he was surprised by the firmness of her grip. "That's right, madam. I need to ask you about the robbery," she nodded, composure returning. "Of course. Although I fear I won't be much help, it happened so quickly." 3 men wearing bandanas over their faces stopped the coach. They took the strongbox and my reticule, but seemed more interested in the mail pouch than anything else. "Mail pouch?" "Yes." They rifled through it, took some letters, left others scattered on the ground. Vance's mind raced. This wasn't a typical robbery. Did they say anything distinctive about them? The leader had a scar through his right eyebrow. and one wore spurs with silver conchos that caught the light. They didn't speak much, but one called the leader Cass. Vance stiffened. Cass Thornton had been operating in the territory for months, hitting shipments between larger settlements. He was known for his calculating methods and for never leaving witnesses, which made Zara's survival all the more puzzling. "And they just let you go," a shadow crossed her face. "The driver tried to fight back. They shot him, and in the confusion, I managed to hide beneath the coach. When they rode off, I helped him back onto the box, and we continued here." Mabel placed a steaming cup of tea before Zara. "Poor thing hasn't had a proper rest since it happened." "I'm fine, truly," Zara insisted, though the slight tremor in her hands betrayed her. "What concerns me more is finding lodging. I was meant to continue on to Willow Creek tomorrow, but given the circumstances." "Stagecoach won't run again till Monday," Mabel said, "but we've got rooms upstairs, nothing fancy but clean." Vance found himself studying Zara more carefully. Her clothing was quality but not ostentatious, her manner educated but unpretentious. "What brings you to these parts, Miss Whitfield? Not many Eastern ladies travel this far west alone." A flicker of something determination perhaps crossed her features. "I've accepted a position as the new schoolteacher in Willow Creek." This surprised Vance. Schoolteachers in these territories were typically stern, older women with no family ties, not young women with intelligent eyes and disarming smiles. "I should see to the driver," Vance said, suddenly eager to escape the unfamiliar sensations stirring within him. "If you think of anything else about the robbers, let me know." As he turned to leave, Zara called after him. "Sheriff Jameson, thank you for your concern." He nodded once sharply and strode out into the fading daylight, trying to ignore the strange warmth spreading through his chest, a sensation he hadn't felt in years. It was merely duty, he told himself. Nothing more. The following morning found Vance in the saddle before dawn, leading a small posse to track the bandits. The trail went cold at a rocky stream bed 10 miles north, exactly as he'd expected. Cass Thornton hadn't survived this long by being careless. When they returned to town dusty and empty-handed that evening, Vance was surprised to find Zara sitting on the porch of the general store, helping Martha Jenkins sort through fabric remnants. Several local children sat at her feet while she read from a tattered copy of Gulliver's Travels, her expressive voice bringing the tale to life. Even more surprising was the way the typically reserved townsfolk had gathered around, drawn to her natural warmth. Over the next few days, Vance found himself increasingly aware of Zara's movements through town. She'd quickly endeared herself to the locals, offering to help with letters for those who couldn't write, organizing the haphazard collection of books in the back of the general store, and listening patiently to old Mrs. Abernathy's endless stories. He told himself he was merely keeping an eye on a witness to a crime, but deep down, Vance recognized the lie. Something about Zara Whitfield called to him, perhaps her resilience, or the gentle strength that seemed to radiate from her like heat from a banked fire. On Saturday morning, Vance was completing paperwork in his office when a knock at the door drew his attention. Zara stood in the doorway, holding a covered basket. "Good morning, Sheriff. I noticed you haven't stopped for breakfast, so I brought you some of Mabel's biscuits and preserves." Vance blinked in surprise. "That's thoughtful of you, Miss Whitfield. Please call me Zara." She set the basket on his desk and removed the cloth covering, releasing the aroma of freshly baked biscuits. "I also wanted to ask if there's been any progress finding those men." Vance shook his head. "Trail went cold at Devil's Creek, but they'll surface again, men like that always do." She nodded, then glanced around his sparse office with curiosity. The only personal touch was a worn leather Bible on the shelf behind his desk. "Have you been sheriff here long?" she asked, settling into the chair across from him. 3 years. Vance found himself reaching for a biscuit, suddenly aware of his hunger, and before that, he hesitated, unused to personal inquiries. Most townsfolk knew better than to pry. "Ranched a small spread north of here." "What changed?" The question hung in the air between them. Vance met her gaze, finding no idle curiosity there, only genuine interest. "Lost my family," he said simply. Didn't see much point in ranching after that. Understanding softened her expression. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to, it's fine, he interrupted, then gentled his tone. It was a long time ago. 3 years isn't so very long, she said quietly. An uncomfortable silence fell. Vance cleared his throat. What about you? Teaching seems a long way from whatever life you had back east. A small smile played at her lips. I grew up in Boston. My father was a professor at Harvard, my mother a society matron who despaired of my bookish ways and lack of interest in suitable suitors. And they let you come all the way out here. Zara's smile faded slightly. My parents passed away last winter, influenza. With them gone and no immediate family remaining, I decided it was time for a new beginning. When I saw the advertisement for a teacher in Montana Territory, it seemed providential. That's quite a change. Life rarely follows the paths we expect, doesn't it, Sheriff? Her eyes held his, and Vance felt an unexpected connection, two people who understood loss trying to forge new trails. Vance, he said suddenly. My name is Vance. Her smile returned, brighter than before. Vance, she repeated, and somehow his name sounded different on her lips. Thank you for watching over this town. Places like Whispering Pines need good men like you. Before he could respond, she stood. I should let you return to your work. The stagecoach leaves early Monday, and I still need to prepare for my arrival in Willow Creek. As she walked to the door, Vance found himself wishing Monday would never come. Sunday dawned clear and bright, the kind of autumn day that held summer's warmth while promising winter's approach. Church bells rang across town, summoning the faithful to the small white chapel at the edge of Whispering Pines. Vance rarely attended services, not since questioning why a just God would take Sarah and Thomas while he lived, but this morning, he found himself donning his seldom worn suit and walking toward the chapel. He told himself it was to keep an eye on the town, with so many gathered in one place. The truth walked beside him in his memory, Zara mentioning yesterday that she looked forward to attending service, to meeting more of the community before her departure. He slipped into the back pew just as Reverend Collins began the opening hymn. From his position, Vance could see Zara seated near the front, singing along in a clear, melodious voice. Sunlight streamed through the simple stained glass, casting colorful patterns across the congregation and illuminating her russet hair like a halo. After the service, Vance lingered outside, watching as townsfolk engaged in their weekly socializing. Several of the local women had surrounded Zara, likely peppering her with questions about Eastern fashions and customs. Rare sight, you at church, came a familiar voice beside him. Vance turned to find Dr. Palmer, the town's elderly physician, regarding him with knowing eyes. Just doing my duty, Vance replied stiffly. Hum. The doctor's gaze drifted to where Zara stood laughing at something Martha Jenkins had said. Beautiful young woman, our visitor. Shame she's continuing on to Willow Creek. Vance made a non-committal sound. You know, Palmer continued, Whispering Pines has been talking about needing a proper school for years. Those children get nothing more than whatever their parents can teach them, which isn't much in some cases. What are you suggesting, Doc? Nothing. The older man adjusted his spectacles. Though it seems a waste to let a qualified teacher pass through when we've needed one for so long, just an observation. Before Vance could respond, a commotion erupted near the general store. 2 men on horseback had ridden into town, one clutching his bloodied arm. Vance recognized them immediately. Johnson brothers, who ran a small ranch several miles east. Sheriff, called the elder brother Liam. Raiders hit our place, took our best horses, and shot Pa. Vance was moving before the man finished speaking, all thoughts of Zara temporarily forgotten as duty called. How many? Which direction? 4 men, headed northwest toward the high country. Pa's hurt bad sent us for the doc while he and the hands tried to save the stock. Dr. Palmer was already hurrying toward his office for his medical bag. Vance turned to the gathering crowd. Need 3 men with good horses and rifles, he announced. Meeting at the livery in 10 minutes. As the crowd dispersed, many rushing home to check on their own properties, Vance found Zara at his elbow. Was it them? She asked, her voice low. The men who robbed the stagecoach, possibly. Description fits. Vance hesitated, suddenly aware of how close she stood. I have to go. Of course. Concern etched her features. Please be careful. Something in her expression made his heart constrict. I always am. Within the hour, Vance and 3 volunteers, including both Johnson brothers, were following tracks northwest toward the foothills. The trail was fresh and easy to follow. These raiders were either confident or careless. They rode hard through the afternoon, stopping only to rest the horses briefly. As dusk approached, Vance spotted smoke rising from a sheltered ravine ahead. They've made camp, he said quietly, dismounting. We'll approach on foot from different directions. Wait for my signal. The 4 men spread out, moving silently through the growing darkness. As Vance crept closer, voices drifted on the evening air. Good haul. Cass will be pleased. Don't see why we couldn't just head straight for the border. Because the plan is to hit the bank in Willow Creek on Tuesday, you idiot. Biggest payroll of the season arriving Monday. Vance froze. Willow Creek, where Zara would be arriving tomorrow. His blood ran cold at the thought of her walking into a town about to be targeted by Thornton's gang. Moving closer, he could now make out 4 men around a small campfire, cooking what appeared to be a freshly killed deer. The stolen horses were tethered nearby. One man wore spurs with silver conchos that caught the firelight, matching Zara's description perfectly. Vance checked his Winchester, then raised it and fired a single shot into the air, the signal to his companions. Before the raiders could react, he stepped into the firelight, rifle aimed. Don't move, you're under arrest, chaos erupted. 2 of the men reached for their weapons, while another dove for cover. The 4th, the one with the silver spurs, made a dash for the horses. Gunfire exploded from multiple directions as the Johnson brothers and Tom Fletcher, the blacksmith, opened fire from their positions. One raider fell immediately, clutching his chest. Another returned fire, the muzzle flash illuminating his snarling face. Vance took careful aim and dropped him with a shot to the shoulder. The 3rd man threw down his weapon, hands rising in surrender. But the 4th silver spurs had reached the horses and was cutting them loose, creating confusion as the panicked animals scattered. Vance pursued, dodging through the frightened horses. The outlaw swung onto one mount and kicked it into a gallop. Taking careful aim, Vance fired at the fleeing figure. The man jerked but stayed mounted, disappearing into the darkness. By morning, they had rounded up the stolen horses and secured the 3 captured raiders, 1 dead, 2 wounded but alive. The captives confirmed what Vance had overheard. Cass Thornton was planning to hit the Willow Creek bank during the payroll delivery. What about the 4th man? Liam Johnson asked as they prepared to return to Whispering Pines. Wounded but got away, Vance replied, scanning the horizon. He'll warn Thornton. Plans will change, or they might accelerate, Tom suggested grimly. Hit the bank earlier before word spreads. Vance nodded, jaw clenched. Which means I need to get to Willow Creek today before the stagecoach arrives tomorrow. They rode hard back to town, arriving by mid-afternoon. After turning the prisoners over to his deputy, Vance headed straight for the Silver Dollar, where he found Zara helping Mabel serve the Sunday dinner crowd. She spotted him immediately, relief washing over her features as she hurried over. You're back. Is everyone all right? Need to talk to you, he said, voice low. Privately. Concern replaced relief as she followed him to a quiet corner. Quickly, Vance explained what they'd discovered about the planned robbery in Willow Creek. I'm riding there tonight to warn them, he concluded. You can't take that stagecoach tomorrow. But my position will have to wait. Thornton's gang doesn't leave witnesses, Zara. The only reason you survived the stagecoach robbery was pure luck. Fear flickered in her eyes, but determination quickly replaced it. Then I'll come with you tonight. Absolutely not. My belongings are packed and I'm an excellent rider, she insisted. Besides, wouldn't it look less suspicious a couple traveling together rather than a lone lawman? Vance wanted to argue but recognized the logic in her words. Additionally, the thought of leaving her behind in Whispering Pines, where one of Thornton's men might return seeking vengeance, troubled him more than he cared to admit. Fine, he relented. But you follow my instructions exactly. We leave at sundown. As dusk settled over the Montana landscape, Vance and Zara rode out of Whispering Pines on a path that would take them to Willow Creek by morning if they pushed hard. Zara had changed into a practical split-riding skirt, and true to her word, she handled her borrowed mare with confidence. They rode in companionable silence for the first hour, the rhythm of hoofbeats and the vast star-filled sky creating a strange intimacy between them. "You've been quiet," Zara finally said as they paused to water the horses at a small stream. Vance adjusted his saddle, avoiding her gaze. "Just planning. You know, for someone so taciturn, your eyes speak volumes." She stepped closer, her face illuminated by moonlight. "You're worried about what we'll find in Willow Creek. Thornton's dangerous," he acknowledged, "and now he's been warned." "Yet you didn't hesitate to pursue him, even knowing the risks." Her voice softened. "That's rare, Vance, that kind of courage," he snorted. "It's not courage, it's duty." "Is that why you became sheriff, out of duty?" Vance found himself answering honestly, something about the darkness and her presence loosening words he rarely spoke. "After Sarah and Thomas died, I was lost, angry, spent months tracking the war party that attacked our homestead. Did you find them, eventually?" "But vengeance didn't bring the peace I expected." He stared into the darkness. "When I returned, the previous sheriff had been killed trying to stop a saloon fight. Town council asked me to step in temporarily." "And temporary became permanent," she guessed. "Had nothing else to live for," he admitted. "Figured I might as well die doing something useful." Zara's hand found his arm, her touch warm even through his coat sleeve. And now, the question hung between them, loaded with meaning Vance wasn't ready to acknowledge. "We should keep moving," he said instead. "Still have a long ride ahead." They continued through the night, stopping only briefly to rest the horses. As dawn broke, they crested a ridge that overlooked Willow Creek, a town larger than Whispering Pines, with several streets radiating from a central square where the bank stood. "Something's wrong," Vance murmured, studying the town through his field glasses. "Too much activity for this early." Even from a distance, they could see people gathered in the town square and what appeared to be horses tied outside the bank. "They're already there," Zara breathed. "The robbery's happening now." Vance lowered the glasses, mind racing. Change of plans. "We circle around to the south, approach through the alley behind the mercantile." They rode hard, taking a roundabout path to avoid being spotted. At the edge of town, they dismounted, securing their horses behind an abandoned shed. "Stay here," Vance instructed, checking his revolver. "I'm coming with you," Zara replied firmly. "This isn't a debate." "No, it isn't." She met his gaze steadily. "Two sets of eyes are better than one. I'll stay out of sight, but I can warn you if anyone approaches from behind." Vance wanted to argue but knew they were wasting precious time. "Fine. But at the first sign of trouble, you run. Promise me." She nodded, though something in her expression told him she had no intention of abandoning him. They moved through back alleys toward the center of town, the sounds of agitated voices growing louder. Peering around the corner of the mercantile, they had a clear view of the bank across the square. 5 horses stood outside, and through the large front windows, they could see several men with bandanas covering their faces. "Hostages?" Zara whispered, pointing to where townspeople had been gathered in front of the bank, guarded by an armed outlaw. Vance studied the scene, identifying Cass Thornton by the distinctive scar through his eyebrow, just as Zara had described. He was directing the operation, gesturing for his men to bring something from inside the bank. "I need to get closer," Vance murmured. "There's a water trough beside the hardware store that would provide cover." As they watched, 2 outlaws emerged from the bank carrying heavy bags the payroll. A third man followed, pushing the bank manager ahead of him. "We can't let them leave with that money," Vance said. "It's the lifeblood of this town, wages for the miners, ranchers, everyone." "What can we do? There are 5 of them and only one of you." Vance's mind raced. Then he spotted the town's sheriff, bound and kneeling with the other hostages. "I need a distraction." "What kind of distraction?" Something to divide their attention just for a moment. He glanced at her, an idea forming. "Can you ride fast?" Understanding dawned in her eyes. You want me to create a commotion from another direction. It's dangerous, he warned. So is letting them escape with the town's money. Determination hardened her features. Tell me what to do. Minutes later, Zara was mounted again, circling to approach the town square from the north while Vance positioned himself behind the water trough with a clear line of sight to Thornton. The outlaws were preparing to depart, securing the money bags to their saddles. Thornton kept his gun trained on the hostages, backing toward his horse. Suddenly, from the opposite side of the square, came the sound of galloping hooves and Zara's voice raised in alarm. "Raiders, coming from the north, everyone run," her cry created instant confusion. Townspeople scattered, some of the hostages taking advantage of the distraction to flee. The outlaws turned toward the new threat, momentarily forgetting about the hostages. In that crucial moment, Vance stood and fired, his first shot catching Thornton's right-hand man in the shoulder. His second struck another outlaw in the leg. Before the remaining men could locate the source of the gunfire, the town's sheriff had rolled to his bound feet and tackled one of his guards. Chaos erupted. Thornton spotted Vance and fired wildly in his direction, bullets splintering the wood of the water trough. Vance ducked, then rose to return fire, but Thornton had mounted his horse and was galloping toward the east end of town directly toward where Zara had circled around. Cold fear gripped Vance's heart. He sprinted across the square, dodging bullets from the remaining outlaw, and grabbed the reins of a riderless horse. Swinging into the saddle, he spurred after Thornton, praying he wouldn't be too late. He rounded the corner to see Thornton charging straight at Zara, who had dismounted and was helping an elderly woman who had fallen in the street. At the sound of approaching hoofbeats, Zara looked up, her eyes widening as she recognized the outlaw bearing down on her. Instead of fleeing, she pushed the older woman to safety and stood her ground, facing Thornton with unexpected defiance. "Stop!" Vance shouted, raising his revolver, but the thunder of hooves drowned his voice. Just as Thornton reached Zara, she stepped aside like a matador, swinging the heavy satchel she carried directly into the path of his horse. The animal stumbled, nearly throwing its rider. As Thornton struggled to regain control, Vance closed the distance and launched himself from his mount, tackling Thornton from his saddle. They crashed to the ground, Thornton's gun discharging harmlessly into the air. The outlaw was strong, landing a solid blow to Vance's jaw before rolling away and scrambling for his dropped weapon. Zara was faster. She kicked the gun beyond reach, then brought her satchel down hard on Thornton's head, momentarily stunning him. It gave Vance the seconds he needed to subdue the outlaw, pinning him face down in the dirt. "You all right?" Vance gasped, looking up at Zara as he secured Thornton's wrists with handcuffs. She nodded, breathless but unharmed. "I thought I told you to run at the first sign of trouble," Vance growled, relief making his voice rougher than intended. A smile curved her lips. "I never actually promised." By mid-afternoon, order had been restored to Willow Creek. All 5 outlaws were locked in the town jail, the money recovered, and the injured treated by the local doctor. The town's sheriff, a grizzled veteran named Haggerty, had personally thanked Vance and Zara for their intervention. "Don't know what would have happened if you two hadn't shown up when you did," he admitted, pouring them each a cup of coffee in his office. "Been after Thornton for months, never thought he'd hit us in broad daylight. He got desperate after we captured his scouts," Vance explained. "Figured he'd accelerate the timeline." Haggerty nodded, then glanced at Zara. "And you must be our new schoolteacher. Town's been waiting on you for weeks." "Yes, I was supposed to arrive tomorrow on the stagecoach. Mighty fortunate you came early," he chuckled. "Though I suspect the children might be disappointed to have school starting on time after all." As evening approached, Vance found himself standing outside the town's small hotel, unsure why he felt so reluctant to say goodbye. Zara had checked in and been welcomed warmly by the town council, already making arrangements for her new position. He'd accomplished his mission, warned the town, helped capture Thornton, ensured Zara's safe arrival. There was no reason to linger. Whispering Pines needed its sheriff back. Yet he remained, watching as lamps were lit along the main street, golden light spilling from windows as the town settled into evening routines. "I thought you might have left already," came Zara's voice behind him. Vance turned to find her standing in the hotel doorway, her figure silhouetted against the warm light from inside. "Wanted to make sure everything was settled," he said, the excuse sounding hollow even to his own ears. She stepped outside, closing the distance between them. "The town council is quite pleased. They've offered me a small cottage behind the school building, and classes will begin next Monday." "That's good." The words felt inadequate, but Vance couldn't find better ones to express the conflicting emotions churning within him. "Will you return to Whispering Pines tonight?" she asked, a strange note in her voice. "Plan to start back at first light." Silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken words. "I want to thank you," Zara finally said, "for protecting me, for everything. Just doing my job. No." She stepped closer, her gaze holding his. "It was more than that, and we both know it." The directness of her statement left him momentarily speechless. In the days since she'd arrived in Whispering Pines, Zara Whitfield had somehow slipped past defenses he'd spent 3 years building, and standing here now, Vance couldn't find it in himself to regret it. "I'm not good at this," he admitted softly. "At feeling things again. I know." Her smile held understanding rather than judgment. "Loss changes us, makes us afraid to risk our hearts again. And you," he asked, "what are you afraid of?" "The same thing, I suppose, starting over in a new place among strangers." She glanced around at the unfamiliar town. "It's terrifying and exhilarating all at once." Vance found himself reaching for her hand, surprising them both. "You'll do fine here. These people already admire you, and they haven't even seen you teach yet." Her fingers curled around his, warm and steady. "Whispering Pines isn't so very far," she said quietly. "Perhaps a day's ride." "Less, if you push hard," he agreed, something like hope stirring in his chest for the first time in years. "Sheriff Haggerty mentioned that Whispering Pines has been considering establishing a proper school of its own." Her eyes held a question. "Dr. Palmer mentioned something similar," Vance said, the pieces suddenly falling into place. "Town council's been discussing it for months. It would be a shame if those children continued without proper education," Zara mused, a hint of mischief in her expression. "A real shame," Vance agreed, finding himself actually smiling for what felt like the first time in years. As stars appeared in the darkening sky above Willow Creek, Vance Jameson made a decision. He would return to Whispering Pines tomorrow as planned, but not to stay. Instead, he would speak to the town council about their need for a schoolteacher, submit his resignation as sheriff, and begin rebuilding the small ranch that had been his home before tragedy struck. And perhaps, if a certain schoolteacher from Boston were amenable to the idea, he wouldn't be rebuilding it alone. 1 month later, as autumn painted the Montana landscape in brilliant golds and reds, Zara Whitfield arrived in Whispering Pines to take up her new position. The entire town turned out to welcome her, the new schoolhouse hastily constructed but sturdy, decorated with wildflowers and ribbons for the occasion. Standing at the edge of the crowd, Vance watched her step down from the stagecoach, her smile as bright as the day they'd first met. When her eyes found his, that smile softened into something meant only for him, a promise of new beginnings, of healing, of a future neither of them had dared imagine just weeks before. And as Vance moved forward to greet her, he felt the final pieces of ice around his heart melt away. Life had taken much from him, but in this moment, with Zara's hand in his and the community they would build together surrounding them, Vance Jameson understood that sometimes, when you least expect it, life gives back even more than what was lost.